Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Pinot with Phoenix for November 2024. Hard to believe another month of content on the channel is already in the books, and we've done a lot on the channel. It's been another great month. So now, what say we recap it all? And we're going to start off with the first two streams of the month that helped me determine what system my 1985 baseball season replay is going to be in. The first game to help me determine that was Inside Pitch Baseball by Inside Sports Games. Inside Pitch Baseball, you guessed it, baseball simulator. For this one, we went back to 2009 for an interleague matchup between the Tampa Bay Rays and the Colorado Rockies. We were at Coors Field for this one. The Rockies won this game 4-1, and I've still been very hesitant around Inside Pitch. I've made no bones about the fact that I've been of two minds about Inside Pitch. Where on the one hand, in terms of narrative in a baseball game, Inside Pitch does just about everything I could ask for out of a baseball game. But on the other hand, learning this game, learning this one has been quite an episode for me. To the point where pretty much after that stream, I think I was about 99, actually even going in, I would say I was about 95% of the way to my 1985 season replay being an Inside Pitch. Coming out of that stream, I think I was 99% of the way there. But I'm rambling on Inside Pitch. Let's talk about the other half of that baseball stream in Season Ticket Baseball. Again, baseball simulator, I was going to say cheaper than Inside Pitch, but I think by the time you figure in the costs, the materials, and all of that, everything washes out. But there's definitely a lot more season availability in Season Ticket than there is in Inside Pitch. For Season Ticket, we went back to 2000 for a matchup between the New York Mets and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers won that game 10-9 on a wild pitch. And I found in that video that I was actually fighting Digital Diamond and my camera more than I was fighting with Season Ticket. Everything felt very straightforward with Season Ticket. To the point where I finally made the call that my 1985 season replay, and I'm officially saying this, my 1985 season replay is going to be in Season Ticket. So we're all set on that front. I'll have some more musings on that coming up later on in this stream. Anyway, that's it for Season Ticket Baseball. Now let's talk about a brand new game that hit the channel. I think we had, let me see how many we had. We had 1, 2, 3. It doesn't really matter how many new games we had on the channel. Quite a few of them, though. Anyway, this was one of those new games on the channel as we played This War of Mine by Awakened Realms. This War of Mine puts you in charge of a group of civilians stuck in a war zone that's basically been ravaged by a war conflict, and they're just trying to survive. This was definitely a learning game, even though I did have a chance to get this one out on the table before I got it to the channel. I actually really enjoyed the narrative unfolding on this one, even though we had some of the food tokens get pilfered away from this one. Evening, Jester, you're just in time to start for actually it's pretty early during the game recap. And I was just talking about This War of Mine, how I'm really enjoying watching that narrative unfold, even through only the first scenario. And I talked about this during my Tack Up Wargaming retrospective video, but it's great for a different perspective on war, because oftentimes, I think as a society, we tend to romanticize war a little bit. We focus on, like, the pilots going up we're like, oh, go get those bastards, or same thing with the U-boat/sub-skippers, or the soldiers, whatever. But I don't think we really give that perspective to the civilians who are stuck behind the lines, just trying to survive and see what they're going through. So a game like this is actually great for that perspective, in my opinion at least, to really shed some light on what the civilians behind the lines have to go through. So that's kind of my ramble on This War of Mine. Next up, we were on an RPG tour throughout this month of November. We played quite a few of them, and the first one, was it a new one on the channel? I think it was new in November from the looks of it, but we started off with Dragon Age, tabletop role-playing game. Dragon Age from Ronin Publishing puts you in the Dragon Age world with it's almost like Dungeons and Dragons in a way, but set in the Dragon Age universe. I think we did a couple streams of this one. The main thing I was testing with this was Mythic Game Master Emulator, where it's actually a way to emulate the experience of the Game Master. Basically, what you do with Mythic is you frame a yes or no question, potentially modify it based on how likely you think a yes or no question is, and then you roll a D100 to get the answer to that question. The rolls can also modify based on what your chaos ranking is, depending on if you're in control of a scene or not. I thought, personally, with the freeform story like we had in Dragon Age, I thought Mythic worked great on that. And the Dragon Age system is actually pretty interesting, where you've got the 3d6 system with one of your dice being a different color, which is known as your dragon die. I really haven't gotten too far with how the dragon die can kind of play havoc with some of your adventures, but I do think it's really interesting that it's got that kind of a mechanic to it. Admittedly, I am fairly new to the world of tabletop RPGs. I've done stuff like the Call of Cthulhu adventures, but using an actual full adventure with the actual core rulebook, like I did with Dragon Age and several others this month, was very different. So definitely got a good feel for that. Anyway, that's it for Dragon Age. Now let's talk about a world that I'm very familiar with and we're going to be spending a lot of time with on the channel. Let's go into it's the Cthulhu mythos, but let's talk a little bit about Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium is another role-playing game set in the Cthulhu mythos, where you're investigators investigating the goings-on of whatever's going on in Arkham or whatever setting you happen to be in. Now, we had another freeform story that we were doing with another investigator. We sent an investigator by the name of Herman Lake, a private investigator, to try to find out why his millionaire client's daughter had run away. Unfortunately, we started to kind of get into the story of the millionaire's daughter getting sucked into a cult of deep ones, but Herman ended up getting killed. He ended up getting trapped in a temple that I think ultimately was going to turn out to be a red herring with the way the story was going, but Herman just couldn't get out of the temple and he ended up drowning in there. I do really enjoy those freeform stories using the Solo Investigator's Handbook, where if you've got nothing to go with, you can actually roll up an adventure from scratch. And we did another one last month in October with Nick Larson getting into a situation with serpent people and getting killed after being abducted into a tropical setting. Also with Call of Cthulhu, I did a test using Mythic again, but this time I wanted to see how a pre-written adventure worked with it. And I think it worked really well. It helped with Mythic giving you ways to modify the adventure. So, yes, you've got the pre-written adventure, but I don't know, it just didn't really feel on rails, which is one thing that's always bothered me with some of these more scenario-based games and even the pre-written adventures, where Mythic gives you the different possible cutscene events, and even the yes or no questions kind of can take you in a different direction on the story. So even with the pre-written module, what I found is it's essentially like an adventure hook of skeleton to get you started, but you're not really sticking to that story with Mythic modifying everything, especially with the cutscene potential coming into that. So I'm kind of rambling on Call of Cthulhu, but we have definitely not seen the last of Call of Cthulhu on the channel, whether we do more freeform stuff and or more pre-written modules using Mythic Game Master Emulator. One of the things I was worried about was how the Solo Investigator's Handbook would interact with the pre-written adventures. And I think my concern there was if I had the pre-written adventure along with the Solo Investigator's Handbook kind of guiding me along, I was a little bit worried about how the two wouldn't really play nice with each other, where we'd be getting a freeform story, but at the same token, Mythic at the same time really, how do I want to put this? Right. Okay. So the really open-endedness of the freeform story, giving you I'm rambling a little bit. I know where I want to go in my head, but I'm having a problem coming into that. I'll come back to that question in a second, Jester. I want to kind of finish this thought. I want to try to figure out a way I want to put this. So the freeform adventure, the freeform build from Mythic RPG, or from the freeform stuff from the Solo Investigator's Handbook, kind of gives you the story, almost gives you a freeform story, which might be totally different from what you're going for with the pre-written module. But on the same token, and so the two really just, I was worried that they weren't gonna clash with each other. So before we go into the next game, Evening Doug, and let me see about this question from Jester. Why play an RPG over a board game? Board game has the story and you don't need to create it. I don't get solo RPG. I guess the thing for me is, I tend to kind of I tend to liken it a little bit more to kind of a comparison between a scenario-based board game and the solo RPG, where it's at least certainly anything that's got scenarios in it, and that was one of my biggest hesitations as I've been looking into Undaunted 2200 Callisto. I didn't want something that was going to be too on rails, where something like an Arkham, I almost liken it to the Arkham 3rd Edition. I've talked about this before, where I don't like how on rails those scenarios were, where you get to the point where, okay, I know X is going to happen, so I need to do A, B, and C to get ready for it. Whereas if you do a solo RPG, you really kind of get into that story a little bit more, and you can take it really in any direction that you want to with it. So at least for me, I kind of like getting into the ability to create that story. And I'll grant you this too. Jester. It really is kind of a mood thing you have to be in terms of being able to write that story. Because yes, sometimes you do want to just pull out a board game and let it tell you a good story, even if it's a little on rails. But when I'm in the mood for it creatively, I don't know why I said creatively, but creatively, when you're in the mood to create your own story, I find I really like the experience of digging into building my own story. So it's kind of just, again, not really wanting to be on rails and go basically where the flow takes me, almost. Hopefully that ramble kind of answered your question of when it's that creative itch and I want to completely write my own story, that's why I like playing solo RPGs. We'll jump in on that. I'm sure we'll be coming back to that at some point during Pinot with Phoenix. Speaking of Cthulhu, though, we stuck with the Cthulhu mythos with the cards of Cthulhu. So, Jester, yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess you don't want to create the game yourself. It's cool that I do. And that's the beautiful thing about this hobby, really, is there's no wrong answer. Like, you probably look at me like I'm crazy for wanting to write my own stories at times. But again, it's that creative mindset where, yes, you've got to be in the mood to do something like that, but when you're in the mood to do it and you do it, it's actually quite a lot of fun. Anywho, jumping back into the Cards of Cthulhu, the Cards of Cthulhu by DVG has you in the Cthulhu mythos playing the role of whatever investigator and trying to keep four ancient ones from waking up. I believe in the base game it's Cthulhu, Chognar Foggin, Yog-Sothoth, and what's the fourth one? I can't remember the fourth one off the top of my head. I want to say Abraxas, but I wouldn't swear that's right. Anyway, in this game, we actually managed to win this one by keeping the board under control. And I really enjoy the simplicity of this game, where you basically just are trying to keep the board under control, keep the horrors from waking up. So we'll probably get this one onto the channel again. I do need to take a drink before we jump into our next game. And of course, the RPG tour continued this month as we next played 5 Parsecs from Home from Modiphius Entertainment. This one is actually a space wargame RPG where you're controlling a ragtag crew of characters in a space setting, basically trying to become a famous pilot in a sci-fi environment. This is another one where I've been really enjoying watching the narrative unfold, and I've always been a big fan of sci-fi games, So finding like a hard space RPG like 5 parsecs was really a good thing for me. And it's got that war game chart feel that I'm starting to get used to a little bit more. But on the same token, I can pull out a hex map. I can pull out a map of like a book of maps essentially, lay out whatever scenario I want or whatever scenario I've got in mind, and then move the units around on the maps. And I think that's another thing I like about being able to. That really ties into the ability of telling your own story and creating your own story, where whatever setting you can envision, you can pull out. Odds are there's a map for it. We actually brought a new crew member in this crew. He ended up getting pretty banged up already, so we'll probably see. We probably won't see much of him when we get this game to the channel for quite a while. But that's enough rambling on 5 parsecs from home. Next up, we went back to a football game that as we played Momentum Football by Downey Games. This one's actually Momentum Football is actually a drive-by-drive game from Downey Games. And for this one, we went to 2008 for this matchup with a division matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. We were at Lambeau Field for this one. Minnesota won this game handily, and I was actually doing a little bit of ticker testing, where I tested out Final Score Football by Downey Games alongside Ultra Quick Baseball, Ultra Quick Football, which is my known quantity when it comes to Downey Games tickers. I'm going to stick with Ultra Quick Football as my ticker, but I do see purposes for Final Score Football, where if I end up wanting to do a play-by-play game on the channel, I could potentially use Final Score Football to get myself into a situation for the fourth quarter, to be like, okay, here's where we're coming into in this game, and I've got some other roles that I've got set up to give me the situation for, okay, here's what down we're on, here's where we're at on the field, here's how many timeouts each team has. So I've got some house rules that I can use to set up the fourth quarter that I'm going to test out next month during Pinot with Phoenix, and I'm getting slightly spoilerific about that. We'll talk about what's coming on the channel much later. Anyway, next up on the channel, we actually went ahead and finished up my Tack Up Wargaming list for this year with America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies from Compass Games. America Bomber, Evil Queen of the Skies puts you in control of a German bomber in an alternate timeline of World War II, where the Germans have won the war in Europe, and now they've got a forward base in the Azores under pressure from Portugal, and they're trying to bomb the United States, essentially. So for this one, we were targeting General Electric in Massachusetts. I think we got shot down, but I don't remember what happened there. And I do enjoy the narrative in this one as well, and the theme of the alternate history, because I talked about this before during my Lone War Room appearance last year, where this kind of also goes on to what I was saying earlier about not liking games that are completely on rails, where I like having the theme of the historical war games behind me, but I don't necessarily like having the script in there. So again, it's where I like being able to tell my own story. Granted, it's a little bit more framed in the setting of the alternate timeline in World War II, but again, kind of the theme without telling essentially the same story that they get into. So that's it for America Bomber. Next up, we went boxing. We went into the boxing ring as we debuted we brought Title Bout 2 by Straight Jab Media back to the channel. No bonus points for guessing about this one. This is a boxing simulator. For this one, we took out Ivan Drago versus Mike Tyson for this one. Drago actually won this fight really quickly in a one-round TKO. I think it was like 15 seconds left in the first round based on the time, but Drago won this one by a 33-4 round on Tyson, and I don't think the score was even that close. I really enjoy this game, and you can really get into this one as well. But that's a bit of a ramble on Title Bout 2. Next up, we went golfing, as we had a Sunday morning tea time with APA Golf. No bonus points for this one, golf simulator. In APA Golf, we took Tiger Woods out to the Stadium course, which is a course available from APA. I had a disastrous fourth hole, but after that, I was going to talk about Title Bout 2 versus Glory Days Boxing, and I will once I talk about Glory Days Boxing. I haven't forgotten about that. So as I was saying about APA Golf, we ended up 1 under on the day, and We ended up 1 under on the day, and I really enjoy APA Golf. It's actually a very simple system where you roll D66, get a result off the golfer's card, take it to the chart, and then resolve the shot from there. It took me about 2 hours to get through the entire course, but really, really still a fun game, and it gives me the feel of going out and going through a round of golf without having to brave the Daystar with my doughy ghost-like complexion, the Daystar, aka the sun. Because again, I've got to protect my doughy ghost-like complexion. Anyway, that's it for APA Golf. Now let's get into the other half of our boxing trilogy, and we will come back to that Glory Days boxing here during Pinot with Phoenix as we talk about Glory Days boxing by Glory Days Games, another boxing simulator. For this one, we took Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas out for this one. Tyson won this one by a 10th round knockout. This is another great game, but as I promised Jester, I was going to talk a little bit about Title Bout 2 versus Glory Days boxing. Now, Title Bout 2 flows from the flip of a boxing action card, where you determine if the fighter's in control of the action or not. Then you resolve everything from a few more flips of the cards. Where Glory Days boxing gives you a set of dice, and I roll everything in one shot. So the way I roll it in Glory Days boxing, each fighter has a D6 to determine how many stars they've got and where they're coming from on that. Then there's a D100 to determine what action they take, and a D20 that I can use for whatever result I need it for. And I think for me, at least, the Glory Days boxing is actually a little bit more realistic, I think, where it gives you the feel of the judges, several different referees. But for me, at least, Title Bout 2 flows a little bit better, where it's always a pain to have to stop with the dice rolls to kind of read what they're doing, whereas I flip over a card, say, the fighter's not in control, boom, I'm on to the next card. Or, okay, they're in control, what do they do? What happens from all of that? Boom, on to the next action sequence. Where to me, at least, I kind of like I said, I like the flow a little bit better in Title Bout 2 than I did in Glory Days boxing. Now, that's not to say Glory Days boxing is not a bad game. Far from it. I think it's a great game. Very well done. But like I said, for me, Title Bout 2, I think, just flows a little bit better. I'm probably going to pick up a little bit more of Title Bout 2 here in the next couple of weeks. I'm just waiting for some other things to get sorted out before I pursue that. Hopefully that satisfies what I said I was going to talk about for Title Bout 2 versus Glory Days boxing. I'll take a quick drink. Next up after Glory Days boxing, we actually went back to the links again as we played ASG Golf by, I believe this is ASG Games. Again, golf simulator. For this one, we went out to Augusta National with the front nine with Phil Mickelson. This one, I wasn't happy with how the game was flowing, and I don't know if there was something with the rules that I couldn't find or what was going on, but I didn't like how ASG was flowing. Now, Jester did reach out, and thank you for this, Jester. I am going to look into that video series you suggested to help me figure out, okay, here's how the doglegs work, here's how the game actually flows. So I'm going to look into that off to the side. I had ASG Golf scheduled to be part of Advent of the Phoenix next month, but I think I'm going to take that out for now. So we probably won't see too much with ASG Golf on the channel next month. I expect we'll have at least one day of APA Golf, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, and ASG and APA, I'll talk a little bit about comparing those two. Those two are very similar, but I think I like the feeling of APA a little bit more, where I like having the side view, I think, a little bit better than ASG, where ASG gives you a bit of an overhead view, so it's a little bit easier, maybe, to visualize the right-left. But ultimately, once I was able to get over that, I think APA worked a bit better for me, where I could easily take whatever rules I wanted out of APA, whereas I felt like I almost needed to include them with ASG. But again, play the game you want to play, how you want to play it. So that's me getting a little bit rambly on that. We'll probably come back to ASG, but for now, I'm taking it out of my content schedule for this month. Next up, we're again back to, let's see, think you need to view those videos and it'll give me a much better idea how to do things with it. Try out Dice Nuts Golf. I do have another golf game that I'm planning on putting on the channel during Advent of the Phoenix. I've been looking off and on at Dice Nuts Golf, but I'll keep looking into that one, but I'm not sure what I'm doing with that one just yet. Anyway, coming back to what I actually played on the month, we went back to the Cthulhu Mythos again, this time with a more traditional solo adventure with a choose your own adventure, as we played The Darkness Over Arkham by Aconite Books. This one is actually set in the Arkham Horror Files, where you're controlling one of the investigators in there, in basically a story there. For this one, we took our girl Agnes out into this story. I'm not going to spoil it in case you want to play it, in case you want to go through it yourself. I did enjoy watching the narrative unfold for this one. It ended up being fairly short, though, because we ended up getting Agnes into some trouble, and the investigation stalled out very quickly. There are a lot more paths to follow, and I expect we'll see more of that on the channel. Anyway, next up my attention turned back to my role-playing games as I was getting ready to debut a big one on the channel, but we needed a backstory for one of our characters, which is where I brought Call to Adventure into the equation. Call to Adventure, just by Brotherwise Games, has you rolling up the backstory for a character. Well, it actually has you rolling up a backstory for a hero. I've repurposed Call to Adventure to roll up my fantasy character backstories. I don't think it works as well with my Cthulhu Mythos stuff or with the sci-fi RPGs, but for stuff like your Dragon Age for stuff like Dragon Age, D&D, anything high fantasy really, Call to Adventure will work actually very well for building up a backstory. And first up, we actually rolled backstories for both of my Dungeons and Dragons characters. First up was Burrell Amastasia, who's my High Elf Wizard in D&D. We actually won that game, and that was a bonus for us. So I really do enjoy the game, and the reading of the runes and casting of the runes is actually a really unique mechanism where I don't think there's another game really other than that series that does something like that, where you read the runes and get the result that way, where you can also get experience, get your hero and anti-hero cards for extra effects. And as you saw, I even worked those hero cards into my character's backstory. So it was really nice getting into that. We actually played Call to Adventure a second time, as I did an entire stream around rolling up a second character to accompany Burrell into my D&D debuts on the channel. We added Role Player to that stream. Role Player by Thunderworks Games has you rolling up a character's stats. So for this one, we actually rolled up a halfling ranger by the name of Lyndall Brushgather. We ended up losing Call to Adventure, but I wasn't that concerned about the win in Call to Adventure. I was more concerned about getting a backstory out of it. And it even worked out nicely where I was able to work the loss in that into Lyndall's backstory. So they're probably going to be a little bit scarred. We'll talk a little bit more about how their adventures ended up going here in just a minute. But Role Player is another really good game where, again, it has you pulling out dice, rolling the character's stats up, and you can potentially get items from that. So another enjoyable game. I do need to get the expansions out for Role Player at some point, but that's for another time. Speaking of the D&D characters, sure enough, that's what's coming up next was Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. Now, Wizards of the Coast is a company I've had a very long history with. Played a lot of Magic back in high school. Got into it a couple different times since I moved out on my own. But it's not a world it's not a world I'm very happy. I've had a long history with Magic, but not always a happy one. But I'm rambling on. I'm getting off to the side on that one. This one is the most popular role-playing game in the world, and there are several board games based on it. But of course, we weren't playing any of the board games. We actually had the full adventure out, where I took Lyndall and Burrell into a couple of different scenarios using the Solo Adventurers Toolkit, which is available on DriveThru RPG. I really like the Solo Adventurer's Toolkit. It's actually written by the same author who wrote the Solo Investigator's Handbook for Call of Cthulhu. You get a series of tools to essentially build up a story from scratch. And with Burrell and Lindell, we were investigating a corrupted water source, but we never got to finish our investigation because a scout, as we were retreating to regroup, ended up taking both of them out. I expect we'll see Burrell and Lindell on the channel again, but it'll probably be a little while before we get them out again. But we almost certainly will see more of Dungeons and Dragons on the channel. Did I must have skipped over one of these games because I thought no, never mind. I was panicking a little bit, but we're fine. Next up on the list, we actually went back to our playthrough of Mag 23 Guadalcanal from Historic Wings. Mag 23 Guadalcanal dumps you into Guadalcanal in control of the Cactus Air Force in the World War II Pacific. So this was another rough day where we lost another CO on one of our squadrons. Ruff didn't bite the dust on this one, but we did lose a CO in one of our sub-squadrons. But we did pick up the win in a day in week 2. We need to get one more, and we lock up another win in week 2. I really enjoy this game, and there's a common theme that we're going to hear with a lot of these games. I'm enjoying watching the narrative unfold. And everything for Mag 23 Guadalcanal is actually very simple, and a lot of it has been abstracted, where you don't have to visualize the individual planes moving on the map, or you don't have to envision where the ships actually are. So I really like that aspect of the game, where the more traditional hex and counter games have kind of made me a little bit nervous in the wargame world. I know, at least for me, I see a million counters, and I tend to get very intimidated in a hurry on that. So I think something like this is really good when I want to scratch that wargame itch, and just again let it tell me a good story. Speaking of stories, that's it for Mag 23 Guadalcanal. Next up, we had another RPG debut on the channel as we played Star Wars: Force and Destiny by Edge Studios. This one is a Star Wars RPG where we're playing in the Star Wars universe. For this one, it's actually a very new system where you've got custom dice that come with the starter set. You roll those, and depending on what combination of threats, successes, failures, and advantages come up, you can potentially work out a story of, okay, you get this effect, but at some kind of cost. Like, say, for instance, I'm trying to slice into a computer system. Maybe we succeed, but we trip off a silent alarm or something like that. Or we fail to slice into the system, but we manage to find that there's as we're poking around in the introductory part of the system that there's a holocron around or something. Basically, the result is left up to interpretation, where you have to kind of it's that instance of telling your own story, which I probably have about half of that to go, but I really liked how this one was playing out. And there's definitely heavy narrative potential to the point where, in the same order I got the core rulebook for Star Wars: Force and Destiny, I actually got a Star Wars Atlas, where I can lay out where some of these worlds are located in the Star Wars universe, get some information about them, and be like, okay, I want to go to this world, tell this story. Because what I'm envisioning is taking some Sith-aligned characters out and telling some of those stories. And as a quick aside before we jump into our next game, that's coming from when I played Star Wars: The Old Republic for a cup of coffee way back in 2013, 2014. That was a very narrative-heavy game. Actually, it's an MMORPG. My favorite stories in Star Wars: The Old Republic were actually the Sith stories, namely the Sith Inquisitor and the Sith Warrior. And I wanted to be able to pick these up I wanted to pick Star Wars: Force and Destiny up to let me tell similar stories in a more tabletop setting. So I'm looking forward to doing more with Star Wars: Force and Destiny on the channel. Next up, we had yet another role-playing game debut as we played Arkham Horror, the role-playing game, also from Edge Studios. As you can probably guess, this is another RPG set in the Cthulhu mythos. I don't see this one replacing Call of Cthulhu yet, but I'm going to see what I think after a freeform story with that. And I think part of the problem I had with Arkham Horror, the role-playing game, is that the story and it's a starter story, granted. I didn't want to bring Mythic into it because I was more focused on learning the game, but the story is very, very on rails. I did kind of like the mechanics where you've got your dice and you have to spend those to take your actions. But I think part of the problem I had, at least with the starter set in Arkham Horror, the role-playing game, is the starter story is Night of the Zealot. And Night of the Zealot is also the introductory campaign in Arkham Horror, the card game, but I can only play that kind of story so many times before I know, okay, it goes in the same way. Where we try to get out of the house only to discover, wait a second, the house is locked. The door is basically missing, so we've got to find some other way out. I can only play that kind of story so many times before I get sick of it. So we may pull some of those characters out into a more freeform story using Mythic and or the Solo Investigator's Handbook to build something up, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, that's it for Arkham Horror, the role-playing game. Next up, we went back to Historic Wings again as we played Tally Ho. Tally Ho puts you into the Battle of Britain in a similar style to Historic Wings, into the Historic Wings games. I did Mission 1 again, because this time I wanted to do a narrative test to see, okay, what do I think about writing the narrative, like the narrative and the after-action reports from these missions. Because actually, Thomas Van Hare, the author of these games and the owner of Historic Wings, reached out to me and he's like, okay, you write the narrative from this perspective, from the flight controller's perspective, essentially. I do like Tally Ho, but the narrative is one thing I'm actually going to knock it for a little bit, at least for me. Maybe there's people that the flight controller, the 10,000-foot view of the battlefield narrative kind of jumps out to, but I'm not one of those people where the narrative just doesn't pop out for me as easily as it does in something like a Mag-23 Guadalcanal. And maybe it'll take playing it a few more times just for that narrative to start popping out, but it just wasn't popping out for me that easily. Like I said, I really enjoyed playing the game, but the narrative, a lot of people would probably consider it a minor detail, but for me, it's important enough to note, so I'll mention it and say, and like I said, I'll say, the narrative just didn't pop out as easily for me as it does in Mag-23. And again, it might just be a fact of I play Mag-23 Guadalcanal a lot more than I play Tally Ho. So maybe that's why the narrative is jumping out more easily for me on Tally Ho, or on Mag-23. Anyway, that's it for Mag-23 Guadalcanal. Finally, holy crap, we're 40 minutes into this video and we're just now getting to the last game of the month. The last game of the month was a hockey debut as I played Stratomatic Hockey from, Stratomatic Games. And no bonus points for guessing this one, Hockey Simulator. Jester had actually sent this to me a while back, but I kind of got a little bit jaded with hockey games, so I decided to table it for a little while and kind of put it on the shelf. I finally decided, okay, what the hell, we might as well, actually we're not at the last game of the month yet, but I finally decided to dust off Stratomatic Hockey and pull it out for a 2017-18 matchup between the Detroit Red Wings and the Chicago Blackhawks at the United Center. This obviously isn't a division rivalry anymore, but it is very much a geographic and traditional rivalry. Detroit won this game 4-3 in overtime, and it played pretty quickly, even for me still learning the game. I think it was like an hour 13, hour 14, I want to say. Let me see if I can find out how long it took me. That's not where I want to be. Here will probably work. Let's see, view channel. Hour 20. So actually it was a pretty good length of time, where it seemed to flow a lot better for me than either Appa or Inside the Crease did. I think of the three, this is the one I can see. I think this is the one I can follow, or I can see doing more with on the channel, just because I like how it flowed. So you sent it to me because you figured I would like it. Playing Basic is going to work in the beginning, and it's a pretty good game all the way around. Well, we may find that out in the future. I haven't decided yet if I want to do like a series playthrough like what RJL did with I think the 2023 4 Eastern Conference semis between the Panthers and the Bruins. We'll have to give that some time, how I want to fit everything in on the channel. We'll probably do more with Strat Hockey at some point in the future. Like I said, I haven't decided what that's going to be yet. So that's it for Stratomatic Hockey. Last game we had on the month was actually, once I take another drink, last game of the month was actually basically a 4-stream session, as we had the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament to start Christmas in Arkham. Fate of the Elder Gods by Greater Than Games has you switch sides and play as the Ancient Ones. And that's the premise behind the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, leading into Christmas in Arkham, where we're playing as the Ancient Ones trying to get summoned, and then whichever Ancient One gets summoned, we then switch sides, goes play as the Investigators, and try to banish the Ancient One. As always, I had a lot of fun with this tournament. And our opponent this year, actually the winners group this year, ended up being Shubni Gudath coming out of the first group, then Ithaca coming out of the second group, and finally Yog Sothoth coming out of the third group. In this tournament, every single Ancient One got summoned, but Yog Sothoth ended up winning the tournament with no Elder Signs and 2 curses, to Shubni Gudath's no Elder Signs and 3 curses. I forget what Ithaca did, but Ithaca, while he got summoned, Ithaca ended up getting eliminated via tiebreakers. So our opponent for Christmas in Arkham is Yog Sothoth. And that's it for all the games, and holy cow, we're already at 42 minutes on this one. So, let's recap Mystical Munchies. For Mystical Munchies this month, we were cooking out of the unofficial Disney Parks cookbook. For each recipe, we started off with the corn dog nuggets as the appetizer. It was actually a fairly simple recipe, and I was happy with how that one turned out. I could see using it as an appetizer. The side was the pizza spring rolls. I would say these were okay. Very bready, though, and I think a lot of that was just because of the pizza spring rolls kind of burying everything. And it was because of the pizza spring rolls burying all of the sauce and stuff in there. It actually ended up being, well, I would say fairly hot, but yeah, let's remember, Phoenix, that they were coming fresh out of oil, even with a little bit of time to cool. So, yeah, not completely happy with the pizza spring rolls. Next up for the entree, we had the baked lobster macaroni and cheese. I substituted in shrimp for the lobster. This turned out really good, and as is mentioned in the recipe, you actually have a lot of substitution options coming out of this. So when I do a lot on the channel, I'll have a lot to talk about and a lot to say, so a longer video. I'm just not used to having my episodes of Pinot with Phoenix being this long. Usually, it's only the ones coming out of the advent of the Phoenix that are this long, so maybe it's just taking me a little bit of getting used to as I start doing more with streaming on the channel. Next up, we had the dessert, though. We had the caramel pecan bars. These were really good, and I got very rave reviews at work when I brought them in for my last week for the year, and I can't believe that I'm off for the rest of the year at this point. Next up, we had the drink. Today, we had the drink, which was the Jungle Juleps. This turned out pretty good, and I actually ended up having more of an episode fighting with the blender than anything. One thing I will say that I didn't mention in the taste test, the Jungle Juleps actually ended up being fairly pulpy, and I think a lot of that was because the pineapple didn't break up as much as I thought it would as I was blending everything. Maybe if I had a stronger blender, it probably would have broken up a little bit more. So that's something to keep in mind if you make the Jungle Juleps in the future. But that's it for Mystical Munchies. That's everything we did on the channel. So next up, let's go through Ask Me Anything. For those of you who are new to Ask Me Anything, and Jester, Doug, I apologize, but you guys have probably heard this spiel countless times. But if you have a question you want me to answer for the Ask Me Anything segment, the way you get it on for the segment is you'll leave a comment on any video from the previous month's recap to the last video before the next recap. And as long as the question isn't too personal, I will answer it. As far as what I deem to be too personal, just use a little bit of common sense. The rule I always tell people is, if you don't want it asked of you, don't ask it of me. Unfortunately, we didn't have any AMA questions this month, so this will be another short segment. But I do have a special topic that I want to talk about. I want to revisit the tabletop RPGs on the channel. As you heard during the game recap, we did quite a lot with tabletop RPGs on the channel. We had several videos with Call of Cthulhu, 5 Parsecs from Home, Dragon Age, Dungeons and Dragons, other adventure books, and we've got a lot more to come on the channel. As I mentioned, we have not seen the last of tabletop RPGs on the channel at all. What I've found so far is that when I have nothing to work from, I can either use a freeform tool, like I'm doing with the Solo Investigator's Handbook for Call of Cthulhu, or the Solo Adventurer's Toolkit for D&D, or Mythic Game Master Emulator, which actually has been working for Dragon Age really well. I can actually build up my own story, but if I have a pre-written adventure that I'm going through, I like to use Mythic a little bit more, because Mythic, I think, gives me an easier way to change the stories out with the cutscenes, where if you roll doubles, then you end up getting a cutscene of some kind. So, and another reason that it's easier for me to use Mythic is because it lets me separate out the scenes a little bit easier, so the chaos range can change and the scenes are a little bit more defined. That leads me to something that I'm looking to put on the channel at some point in the future, and holy cow is this heavy. But as you can see, I have picked up the Masks of Nyarlathotep adventure module from Call of Cthulhu. As you can see, it is absolutely gigantic. There's a bit of a glare there, but there's a 2-volume book in here, plus there's a keeper screen in here that I haven't had a chance to crack open yet. Actually, I'm surprised I've still got this in plastic wrap. Let's go ahead and crack this keeper screen open in the Masks of Nyarlathotep expansion and take a quick look at it. Actually, it looks like this has also got... Yeah, those are some massive books. This is just the keeper's screen from it. So let's crack this open and take a look. I'm going to try to protect you guys from spoilers, partly because I want to be protected from spoilers myself, and I'm trying to figure out where in the world I cut into this stupid thing without ruining any of the... Here we go. I was trying not to ruin any of the handouts in here. That's probably going to be like a couple-month adventure to go through, assuming I go through it every single night. That'll definitely be an off-season project, that's for sure. So we've got the actual cover here for the keeper screen. Back cover for that. That can go away. And yep, we are starting to get into handouts here. So yeah, I'm going to keep that off shot. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you guys in case you might be going through it, and I want to keep spoilers from myself. There's my exercise for the day, picking up those books a few times. You're not wrong on that at all. But here's the art for the keeper screen, and let's do it this way. Put that down there. I'm probably going to have to watch this back later. We've also got reminders of the expedition in here. Let's do it right here. With the expedition characters and where they are. Then I think that's key NPCs. And I believe that's more NPCs. So yeah, that's the keeper's screen pack. Oop. And I sent the cover for it flying, so bear with me a second while I reorganize these and go get that. Ideally, of course, without sending the handouts flying. There was another big module I was looking at getting for D&D, the Temple of Elemental Evil, which Goodman Games rewrote for 5th edition. But given that only takes me from levels 1 to 7, and it costs like $100, I figure it's probably a smarter use of my D&D pre-written module money to spend $50 on something that can take my characters from level 1 to like 11, 12, 13, something like that. Basically where I essentially feel like I'm getting more adventure I'm getting more adventure for my buck, essentially. And this does not want to go back in. There we go. Got it. Don't got it. Hold on. There we go. See if I can push that back down. Okay. Then we'll throw that heavy beast back in. And I'm going to put that down here. I don't want to have that. I don't want to throw that somewhere and have it land with a thud and cause something bad to happen. Anyway, like I said, I see Masks of Nyarlathotep being a potential off-season project. And I definitely want to get more practice in with other pre-written adventures, not just Call of Cthulhu, but in other systems too. I do want to find I do want to find a way to run that on the channel sometime in the future. And we'll have more RPGs on the channel, but more on that during my end-of-year chat, which as of now, I'm thinking will be a special topic during December's Pinot with Phoenix. Anyway, speaking of December, let's talk about what's coming in December. December will feature more of the second annual Advent of the Phoenix. We're already strong into it, having wrapped up the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, and as I mentioned, we have our opponent for Christmas in Arkham in Yog-Sothoth. As usual, with a month like this, I'm not going to talk about every single game I've got coming up, because if I did that, we'd be here for probably another hour if I did that, but I will highlight the Sunday and Wednesday videos as usual. Sundays, of course, will feature Christmas in Arkham for the first 3 weeks of the month, as we'll lead off with Eldritch Horror, then Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, then Elder Sign. After that, we're going to dip under the waters of the Mediterranean, as for the first time we play Beneath the Med on the channel. The last Sunday of the month, we'll have another early morning tea time as we play Appa Golf. As for Wednesdays, we have the Cards of Cthulhu coming up, then Appa Baseball, then we'll play some Star Realms, and we'll probably have something coming up for Christmas morning, or Christmas Day. I'm thinking that'll be a special freeform Call of Cthulhu Christmas adventure, because I do have a Christmas-themed adventure hook for Call of Cthulhu ready to go. But stay tuned for more on that. I also do expect to be on the other side of the state for Christmas, but more details on that when I get closer, and I will still be making videos while I'm out visiting my family for Christmas. Also for Christmas, during December, we'll have the demo game for my 1985 season ticket baseball replay. The replay starting January 1st. We'll have the demo game, which will be my previous replay's World Series between the Oakland Athletics and the Pittsburgh Pirates, as it will be at Three Rivers Stadium. Mystical Munchies for the month of December will take us to the aforementioned world that I've had a long and not always pleasant history with, as we'll be cooking out of the Magic the Gathering Cuisines of the Multiverse cookbook. We'll be cooking blueberry scones, ooze-infused biscuits, Jumpstart energy bowls, and Heart and Soul babka. There may be a special drink episode of Mystical Munchies, even though there's only 4 Saturdays in the month, but it will be very easy for me to carve out some time, most likely to say, okay, let's do a special drink episode of Mystical Munchies in December. Also, something fun we're going to do during the month of December is at the end of the first stream every day during the month, we're actually going to crack open our own little Advent calendar, which is Christmas. It's a Kaiju Christmas, where it's got 24 thematic polyhedral dice. Looks like it's going to be 3 sets with 3 additional single dice, some larger dice, and each set features matching fun and color designs. We'll see this cracked open. We'll probably crack this open during what I hope to be tomorrow afternoon's stream. As far as the backstory about this one, breaking news. The wintry Northlands are under attack from a massive kaiju who has broken free from beneath the ice caps and the rampaging beast. And the rampaging beast is out of control. Reports say Santa himself is taking action to defend the North Pole. Prepare for an epic show in the snow. Mega Claus versus Mecha Claus. Who will triumph in this colossal struggle between 2 great titans? Well, we'll find out all about that. Cards of Cthulhu looks interesting, but seems hard to get a hold of. Yeah, it is pretty hard to get a hold of, to the point where when I went on The Geek to find it, I actually had to order my copy in from Germany. I actually had a much easier time getting a hold of the expansion. So for whatever that's worth, maybe that's something you can keep an eye out for. But keep an eye on The Geek, Doug. You'll probably find it at some point. If you'll find it any place, you'll find it there. But let's go ahead and wrap this video up. That's another episode of Pinot with Phoenix for November 2024. We have a lot of great stuff coming up on the channel. Tomorrow morning, we'll feature the first leg of Christmas in Arkham as we play Eldritch Horror. That one will be a recorded video, not streamed. And I've talked about this before, where in the Arkham Horror Files, I tend to like using recorded videos more than streaming, because I usually use a lot of camera cuts in the Arkham Horror Files. Except for something like the Arkham Horror RPG, or like the adventure book, The Darkness Over Arkham, that I played last month. Anything that's still flowy in the Arkham Files, I can probably stream, but Christmas in Arkham will be recorded content. What I hope will be the first stream of the month will be tomorrow afternoon, where we'll be starting a new background career in the Hunters. As for Saturday next week, Mystical Munchies will start out of the Magic the Gathering Flavors of the Multiverse cookbook with the appetizer, Blueberry Scones. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.